Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We are back with another episode of Daily Palantir, and on today's episode, we're going to do a couple things. Number one, we're going to go through some price action, what happened in the macro, why Palantir fell today, and how it kind of recovered towards the end of the day. I did buy the dip, about 80 shares today, around that 24.70 range. Number two, Palantir got a $10 million contract last week that I did not get a chance to make a video about because there was a lot of other news, but that's Palantir. There's always a lot of news to cover. So I'm covering it today in today's episode. And that was a $9.8 million contract that I think a lot of people maybe saw, but probably haven't heard of because it kind of went under the rug. And I want to talk about what that contract is, why it matters, it's a government deal, and what is the overall pie that is becoming larger and larger for Palantir with deals like this. At the end of this episode, you're going to see a clip from a recent podcast I did with my guy Adam. His Twitter's in the description, and the full podcast is in the description as well. And in that clip, he's going to talk about why we got this contract, why this contract is important, and ultimately what it means for something called Project Brown Heron, which a lot of people don't know about. We're going to discuss that as well in today's episode of Daily Palantir. Before we get into the video, first of all, thank you to everyone who signed up for Hobbits.ai, the new custom LLM I built for Palantir. If you haven't signed up, it's free to sign up, Hobbits.ai. If you want to sign up for the yearly subscription where you get unlimited use of it, it's $42.69 a year. Really supports the channel, allows me to keep doing what I'm doing, and it's really fun because you get to ask this thing millions and millions of questions. It's trained on tens of millions of words that I've spoken over the past 3 years, all Palantir's public data, and it's into one place. It's getting better every day, and the initial feedback I got over the past couple days is that people really like using it. So check that out. Thank you everybody for signing up. dailypalantir.substack.com. I send an email newsletter every night as well. Make sure you subscribe to that so you get all of this in written form. Let's get into the video. All right, so let's get started with price action to get this moving. Now, I did buy the dip. I bought a bunch of shares in my Roth and a bunch of shares just outright today. Palantir down about 30% on the day. After hours, 24.83, ended at 24.70. I think we got to the low of 24.30. Now, why do we get a dip? Obviously, we were at 27.50 a couple days ago, and now we're at 24.70, and people are like, what's going on? Couple of unique things I think that are really important to remember as we are in this new kind of price range for Palantir, and the psychology behind dips and buying and selling and all of that stuff. First of all, the fact that I'm saying 24.70 is a dip is insane. And the only way I get to say that's a dip is because we were higher than 24.70, significantly higher at 27.50. So 24.50 a couple weeks ago was like pushing the limit because we were kind of stuck in that 22, 23 range. Now it's a buying opportunity. And I think the psychology behind the market and price targets can change as quickly as an analyst changes their price target. Bank of America at 28, Wedbush now at 35. Because sentiment can change, narratives can change. So it's quite interesting to see 24 be dip buying opportunity. But I think if you've been in Palantir for a long time, the fact that 24 is a dip buying opportunity is quite phenomenal given how far we were stuck in the 16 range and obviously before that in the $7, $8 range. So I do think it's really interesting to see how people are thinking about buying the dip and selling into momentum as well. Now, why do we fall from 27.50? I think we all knew at 27.50 we were kind of pumping on two things. Number one, the Titan contract. And then number two, AIPCon, which is great, but it's probably not long-term sustainable to hold those pumps. I mean, I think we all kind of knew that. So it's actually pretty healthy consolidation to come back to this $24 range, really stay in that 24, 25, develop a strong base so that 22 and 23 kind of seem out of the picture, just like 19 and 18 seem like it's not happening. We need to make sure 22 and 23 seem like it's not happening, which means you're going to get pullbacks from the $27 range, $26 range back into the 24. I think it's a reasonable dip. It could go lower. I'll buy more. I don't really care, buying this for the long term. So overall, that's not the craziest price action today. Now, we did get CPI data in the United States of America. Inflation came in a little bit hotter than expected. The banks thought we would get to 3.1% annual inflation. We came in at 3.2. So it was a hot CPI, not crazy hot, but it definitely was more than what consensus estimates were. And the market was okay. So if you just look at this right here, S&P closed at the highest it's ever closed, which is insane. 517 right now after hours, 516 close. And then NVIDIA, I mean, goodness gracious, NVIDIA 931 after hours. It's insane, dude. It's absolutely insane. It was up 7% today, and then it's up another 1.3% after hours. I mean, it's just, the market, I think, is coming to a conclusion that AI is real, that money needs to be allocated. And if CPI, especially a hot CPI, not crazy hot, but a decently hot CPI could not take down the market. Some individual stocks fell here and there, but it could not take down NVIDIA or the S&P. QQQ as well, 443, the NASDAQ 100. It starts to make you think we are in a bull market and inflation eventually will come down, rates eventually will come down, even if it takes time. But if the market's not going to have a pretty heavy pullback on these hotter CPIs, then I don't know what's necessarily going to take the market down. Now, Palantir, not the NVIDIAs of the world. It's not the S&P, so it's going to be a little bit more volatile. But the fact that Palantir even is in this $24 range and it wasn't as violent as we thought it would be, I think that's a pretty good sign for Palantir. So we'll see what happens, but that is the price action today on Palantir. Okay, let's get into the core thing I wanted to talk about today that I think is really interesting in regards to Palantir and this $9.8 million contract that I told you they got. So here is the headline. Palantir, a U.S. government business, wins $9.8 million DISA contract for a joint electromagnetic spectrum ops tool development. Now, we're going to be talking a lot about electromagnetics today. So, reading a little bit from here, Palantir, USG, has made a significant contract from the Defense Information Systems Agency, DISA, marking a pivotal step in enhancing the United States defense capabilities in electromagnetic spectrum operations. $9.8 million. This initiative aims to provide U.S. forces with a cutting-edge planning tool ensuring electromagnetic spectrum superiority across all warfighting domains. Why does this matter? This represents a crucial advancement in the U.S. military's ability to plan and operate within the electromagnetic spectrum. This domain is essential for communication, navigation, and sensing across the globe. It's becoming increasingly contested. Okay, so what is electromagnetic warfare and why is it important in the context of Palantir? Why did they get this $10 million contract? So I'm going to use Hobbit's AI and I'm going to ask it these questions and it's going to give me some relevant data that I think is going to be really important to help us understand why this is so vital and why, as a shareholder, you really need to know this because it gives you a clue into the other contracts they're going to win, which I believe are going to be in the tens of billions over the next decade. So Project Brown Heron, first of all, why is it relevant for Palantir? It's a collaborative effort between Palantir and the United States Air Force and the United States Space Force. The initiative is focused on enhancing the operational readiness of these military branches through the use of advanced data analytics and integration. Palantir's role in this project is to provide DaaS, data as a service. There's software as a service. They're providing data as a service, which is a significant step in leveraging technology to improve military efficiency and decision-making processes. The relevance of Project Brown Heron to Palantir lies in its alignment with the company's expertise in big data analytics. And Project Brown Heron, they got a $54 million contract for this a while back. And uniquely, it's important for personal decisions, planning and operations, and space situational awareness. Okay, so that's what Project Brown Heron is. Now, why is this relevant with electromagnetic warfare? So I say, what's the link between electromagnetic warfare, Palantir, and Project Brown Heron? First of all, electromagnetic warfare is a form of warfare that uses the electromagnetic spectrum, like radio waves, infrared, ultraviolet, X-rays, etc., to achieve military objectives. This can include disrupting or disabling enemy electronic equipment and communications through various means, such as jamming and deception, which is basically the contract that Palantir just got. They need to be able to use that $10 million to build prototypes to help the military continue to do that. And Project Brown Heron, as it relates to Palantir, involves the use of electromagnetic techniques. This is why Project Brown Heron is so important as a part of its electronic surveillance program. Palantir's technology is utilized to process and manage the data that is gathered during these operations, which can be critical for decision-making and operational effectiveness in the field. So electromagnetic warfare involves the use of electromagnetic spectrum for military objectives. Project Brown Heron includes these techniques, and Palantir's involvement in this indicates its role in the modern military strategies and data analysis. All of this comes together at the end of the day because there are a variety of different projects. We know JADC2 is the big one that the government is ultimately rolling out over the next decade. Project Brown Heron being a small part of that. Then we got Project Lynchpin. We have a bunch of these different contracts and sub-projects underneath the overall JADC2. This is what Mariana from Bank of America was talking about in her $28 upgrade that relate back to two basic core things. Making sure the U.S. is prepared in case something happens. So that's sort of operational readiness in the context of making sure if an enemy were to attack or if an enemy were to attack any of our allies, we can respond immediately. And then number two, making sure that we prevent attacks from happening. So one is if it happens, let's be ready. And number two is let's mitigate it from happening in the first place. Electromagnetic warfare is relevant in both contexts. So if you are on the battlefield, there is a use case for being able to use X-rays, radio signals, and everything on the electromagnetic spectrum to jam communication between your enemy and who they're plotting with to be able to give you a strategic advantage. But also, if you are trying to figure out something is going to happen, for example, stop a terrorist attack, you also need to be able to use the electromagnetic spectrum to potentially figure out if something's going to happen. So there's a variety of different use cases for this particular a part of warfare, and Palantir just got a $9.8 million contract. Now, $9.8 million might not sound like a lot. Project Brown Heron was a $54 million contract they got a year ago. This is part of what I believe is going to be hundreds of millions over the next couple years, and then tens of billions over the next decade that are going to be dedicating to making sure that Palantir in particular has the ability to protect the United States government. And why do I say Palantir? Well, In general, the U.S. wants to make sure they protect themselves. They have $886 billion in defense spending. Palantir just got the Titan contract. That Titan contract solidified them as the United States' first software prime contractor, meaning they beat Raytheon for a hardware contract as a software company, proving how good they are at software, enabling itself onto the battlefield when it comes to that software powering that hardware. So the reason I think a lot of that money is going to go to Palantir is because if they're getting a $10 million contract for this, which $10 million, again, is not a lot of money, but it's the fact that they're getting picked, they're conducting the efforts, they're building the prototypes, they're delivering the deliverables that are necessary to be able to make this happen. That's going to lead to many more contracts. Same thing with the NHS. We got the NHS. We're going to redo their entire system, and then we're going to get Canada. We're going to get Brazil. We're going to get all these socialized systems across the world that have a crappy healthcare system. Not to say that, the United States is that much better, but just to say that if you ask some of those people, they hate the wait times. They hate the fact that, it is socialized in nature, so they don't have that much choice, but they're willing to deal with the social nature of their healthcare system and give up sort of how the free market operates for the values, the axiomatic beliefs that people have in those countries, which is that everyone should have a right to healthcare. That's great, but you need software or the free market to be able to make it actually efficient. And if you're not going to have the free market, then you need software, which is why Palantir's product is going to be high in demand, and the NHS has already proved that. The same thing is going to happen in the US DoD. We're going to get these small little contracts, just like we have with the NHS, small, little contracts, 10 million, 5 million here. And then we're going to get some big daddy contracts, and Titan was one of those big daddy contracts. Sham Sankar tweeted just 2 days ago, why is America the best by far at software? And he says it's culture, not IQ. There's smart people everywhere, but globally, competitive enterprise software companies, China has 0, India has 0. America is the only place where this culture exists at scale. And he goes on to basically say, this is why we need to be spending more on software if we're the government, because if this is what we excel at, if this is our competitive moat as a country, we should probably allocate to the software companies in the defense space that are already doing so well in the commercial space. So that's the contract. Really big deal. One of those things that goes under the rug because it's not some crazy $150 million contract, but it is an important contract. And the fact that we're getting it at the same time with Titan just goes to show me the government business is reaccelerating rapidly for Palantir. Maybe not going to show up in the numbers this year. Probably will start to show up in 2025. But the fact that we're getting these contracts is the most important thing. And these contracts are inevitably going to lead to more contracts. Last thing I want to show you guys is a clip that I had with Adam, who goes a little bit more in depth into this contract. And a full podcast is in the description, where for an hour we talked about everything going on in the world of Palantir and defense tech as well. Thank you guys for listening and watching. I'll see you guys on the next episode tomorrow.
Now we're starting to see it, what the Army of 2030 is. So if you go back to that 10 million that they won a day or two before, which is another prototype, the electromagnetic battle management tool. Now they're sitting there saying, okay, we're going to be in a bunker somewhere, and we're going to have all these satellites and these planes and these drones overhead, and we want to see what's out there. So Titan is going to be connected to sensors, okay? But this situation, it's going to be with electromagnetic management battle tool, not connected to sensors, but it's connecting to signals. And they're different. So sensors are something that's already, they make it, it's a piece of hardware, it's on the plane, it's on the vehicle, and it's being fed into Palantir's sensor intelligence platform. Whereas a radio signal, for example, it's an enemy that was told, do not bring your iPhone and call your mother. You will be dead if you make that phone call. And you're seeing it all over, and you see it in Israel, Gaza, you see it in Russia, Ukraine, and you're hearing those intercepts, and they're making phone calls, or they're doing what they need to do with technology that either should not be on the battlefield, they're sneaking in, or they don't understand that we are so advanced we're picking up on it. So electromagnetic battle management tool is going to be picking up all these little signals. And in Chime's interview, I think the gentleman's name was Jason. It was the one they spoke for like 66 minutes. He has some big, I think his name was Jason. Really interesting, interview. And it was very defensive and military, obviously. And he talked about this for a little bit. So Titan, to put this all in perspective, to see this is the pie. This is the crust. They're finished. They're doing the crust right now. You're going to be on a battlefield on the outskirts in Titan. And, like I said, they're ordering 150. So I don't know how much that quote unquote space that covers. Is that 500 miles? Is it 1,000 miles? I have no idea. This is why they have to order all these Titans, because clearly there's a range limit.
Right.
And if you're in Germany fighting someone in Russia, I'm assuming a Titan in Germany isn't going to pick up the info in the middle of the forest in Ukraine right now. They have to bring it closer. So there has to be some limits to this, which we'll find out over time. But you're in Titan and you're watching the battlefield, you're seeing all the sensors, you're seeing, okay, we have joint light vehicles over here, we have 7 squadrons over here, and we see from overhead, just through meta constellation, that the enemy is, 500 yards by this river or whatever it might be. With with the battle management tool is, and I could be wrong on this, is my understanding is any soldier take their Sky Kit out or whatever, computer, whatever they're given, they can go onto it and they can, access this electromagnetic management tool, and they can see the surrounding terrestrial layer of their surroundings, and they can see, okay, we have allies stationed, a quarter mile this way, and it's all picking up signals. So now you're starting to really see, okay, so now they're picking up sensors, now they're picking up signals. They're very, very similar, but they're very, very different, which is what I said before. They make certain planes for precision bombing, and they make certain planes for long range, transportation needs, whatever it might be. So they're developing all these products right now in front of our eyes, and they're still prototypes. So the DISA one, the battle management tool, that was a 1 year, I think it was like $10 million. Well, what's going to happen in 12 months if it succeeds? Maybe it becomes 3-5 years and it's $800 million. Like, that's what they're going for. And some people, they might be sitting here and be like, well, that's not a lot. Lockheed gets like $15 billion for an F-15. Yes, you're right. They do. But an F-15 also cost them like $30 million. So they're coming out net negative.
Right.
And with Palantir is their whole thesis, and this is, you cannot argue this, is we want to deliver the best products for the warfighter, for our national security, at a fraction of the cost. The whole point is to do the best job for as little money as possible, to save the dollar for the taxpayer. So now you're starting to see it. So like some people like, oh my God, I thought Titan A, there's still another phase to do. But after we do that phase, you saw it. They order 150 of these. It's $2 billion. Is it 15 billion? No. But that's one product. And now they'll have the battle management tool. That will be another product.